Happy weekend, everyone. We're a couple of weeks out now from round one, so it's a great time for 1v1 comparisons. And we're going to go through from hooker all the way down to the fullback position. Going to be going through guys from top tier gun status through that mid-range and make some decisions from there. A little bit clearer for you, hopefully. So thanks so much for coming in to check out the SuperCoach stuff. If you are new to my SuperCoach content, please let me know in the comments as well if you're keen for more. But hooker, I think the first one we need to go through is Harry Grant versus Connor Watson. 108k difference. Harry Grant is over Watson. Harry has been the number one hooker for a few years now, so keep that in mind, and has a bye round 2. Connor has the dual with the second row forward as well, which I think could be helpful with other players that have dual in, like a Sandon Smith. You can move a few things around with certain trades on a week-to-week basis. And it's obviously looking at round one, but it's looking at that helpful dual that you can have to switch between players when you're doing 2-3 trades a week at certain times. If you're using boosts and all that kind of stuff, you can move things around a great deal, and you've got flex as well to be able to do things like that. Everyone has this strategy of having the 3 fullbacks, whether it's 3 guns or 2 guns and an Iongi, which is all well and good. But what happens if injuries happen to certain guys and you might need to use some different things to muck around with duels? And that's where Watson can be helpful on that front. We haven't seen Watson go to a top tier gun level ever. He had moments last year, but was better at 13 than he was at 9 because he runs the footy more. And that's where you saw his tries and his assists and the like from the 13 role rather than the 9. So that's where he's going to play. Are we going to see more than like a 65 average? Are we going to see him at a 59 if he doesn't happen to get the attacking stats and he's very base heavy? Whereas we know with Grant, he's been higher than this average as well at 75 plus. And I don't think he had a great year last year until basically the back end and then into the final series. So plenty of reasons to jump on either of them. If I was to be going for the top tier guy, you know that you can hold Grant all year. And that's where that becomes very, very helpful in the hooking slot to have that position sewn up and you don't have to do anything about it. Whereas Watson, we're unsure if you're going to be able to hold him all year. But do you spend that extra 100k or do you go down to someone like Watson and build up to a Grant with that gun position in Watson or in your secondary position? So because then the other strategy is to go down that little bit further, and there's not too much available value in my opinion around that 500k mark. So you would be heading down to the 300ks and just a bit above that with guys like Tom Starling. And then you've got guys like Pete Mamazelis. I do think you need to take one of those guys. Starling, we obviously know there's plenty of issues between Sticky and the rest. So you could look at those two as a comparison, and Pete Mamazelis, if he's starting, is probably the smarter of the two, saving 40k. Maybe not as much upside because we've only seen him do really well at starting hooker for big minutes. If he doesn't play the huge minutes, is there enough value? That's the question mark between those couple of guys, and I do think you just have to get Sandon Smith in your team in some way, shape or form. All right, let's go. Have a look at the top few guys that we've got in our front row forward, and if you're looking at Adam Fanua-Blake compared to Payne Haas, compared to Mitch Barnett, I think they're the 3 that we need to look at. And which one do you decide you want in your side? Payne Haas is coming off some ankle surgery, so he hasn't been able to run and get that full fitness. Does he play massive minutes from the start? That's the question, but we know he's the most consistent guy on this list on a week-to-week basis, relying less on tries like Adam Fanua-Blake. And Mitch Barnett has never been a top-tier standard guy like he is right now. At 67.5, he just hasn't been able to do that. Has the dual as well. So that can be the important part. And does he step into the Tohu Harris bigger minute role, the AFB big minute role, 60 odd, 65, 70 minutes at times? And if that's the case, I think he can be a very, very strong front row forward or second row forward for you and your side, and may get to the heights of Adam Fanua-Blake at 72. But if he doesn't, it's, you're going to have that dual benefit sitting around 68 for a guy that you can move around and has potential for a little bit more upside if he can keep some of that form that he had for that shorter stretch of time. And then Adam Fanua-Blake, we know he has a lot of tons in his game. So last year, if you started with him from the beginning, you did get a couple of tries in the first bunch of weeks, which was massive for getting those big scores. If you're looking for him, is it the right time to start with him from round 1 or to get him at a different time where he could go on a run of tons? You saw he was able to score a try in a pretty easy try, to be fair, but his footwork's incredible in that trial game against the Raiders. So that's where you need to be looking in that slot. But again, strategy-wise, how does that work when you're looking at someone like Terrell May? Are you able to fit a couple of these guys in your team that are of high price in that front row forward position, or will you have to spend a little bit less and make a decision with some of the other guys that you might have in this situation there? And we're seeing Tom Hazelton continue to play good footy, but in this bracket here in the 500s, you're looking at guys like Tino and you're looking at Stefano. Are you able to fit Tino with that dual position into front row forward or second row forward with the buy early? Stefano has that buy early as well and has plenty of upside of his own. How's Craig Bellamy going to use him? Can you wait with Tino to see if he's going to get big minutes from the start? There's a couple of question marks on both those guys, but we know that Tino's had the tremendous value in the past and has been a top 1 front row forward. So that's the benefit with someone like Tino. You could buy him from the start, and if he doesn't get injured, he should be in your team for the majority of the year and build his way back up to a high 600s, 700k player and join this group above. So that's where you look at that and go, well, yes, he misses round 1, but can you cover that round 1 score? Yes, definitely. Considering especially when you've got the best 17 of 18 scorers there, that's easy to do. And then you've got him from round 2 and you don't have to worry about him being a trade in come round 4 if he's built up to some good minutes and he's ready to make some cash. So that's that sort of 500k mark there. And then you do go a little bit lower in that front row forward position, and you probably should be looking down in closer to the 400k range, where there are a few guys in this list, in Griffin Neem being one of those guys that should take a step up this year, but how much extra value does he have? Guys like Aaron Clark, guys like David Mwale, all could do a great job this year and improve. But again, how much? Does Aaron Clark get the bigger minutes? We probably need attacking stats out of these guys for them to be really, for you to benefit a lot from them, especially when you've got someone a little bit cheaper in Corey Horsburgh that can do a terrific job as well. If you're looking down at Corey, in his range, you've got guys like Nafahu White, who again should increase in minutes more regularly. Now that a lot of the front row forwards have left the Roosters, but is it going to be enough for him? Is he going to have any attack in his game? These are all the questions with guys like Nafahu White. And then if you're comparing him to Finefuaki in the second row forward position, around that similar price, can you take both? Nafahu has the dual. Fine doesn't have that. Has potential for a bit more attack, you'd imagine, but White has a little bit better base stats. So that's probably the one question in that front row or second row there, is a selection between those two guys at that same price, which can be pretty fun. And then if Corey Horsburgh is the starting prop, then it seems like he's going to be a fairly simple pick in that section as well. And the other one at a similar price is Emre Gula. If he does get that start at the Dragons, then he could have a little bit of value as well. So I think it's just a comparison between all of those guys and which one you personally think has the better, obviously the minutes is going to be big, but the better potential for attack, because those type of guys there, if you can get one try out of them in the first 3 or 4 weeks, then you can quickly make 80, 100k with that one good score and off the jump on the coattails of that really good score and go from there. So that's the front row forward position in a nutshell, in all those more expensive guys and leaving those cheapies until we find out a little bit more on them. For your second row forwards, let's do a little comparison on buying Angus Crichton in round 1 or Isaiah. Big difference in consistency. Isaiah is ridiculous in hitting over 60. The percentage is ridiculously high. It's over 3/4 there of the time that he does hit over 60. It's just ridiculous. It's actually like higher than 80%, which is wild. And then you've got Angus Crichton, who can have some lower gains with some missed tackles and not getting the opportunity as much, but he has the higher upside. So again, is that going to be more of an opportunity for Gus in the early rounds? Or are you happier to have the guy Isaiah who can just get the job done week in, week out, and is a position you don't have to worry about each week? Is he going to hit over that 50 mark? Is he going to get over 60? and that disappointment, where you know how much of a mental game this is, that's where Isaiah Yeo can be a winner for you and your side. Now let's go for 2 more, and we've got Olakau'atu and Jermaine Hopgood. It's a similar situation again with Hamole. Went really well to begin last year, but the actual teams that he comes up against here, he doesn't score as well against. But if we expect the Eagles to do well to start, he should continue to build off his first half of the year last year. Hopgood, on the other hand, is a 13, and that's where you get that benefit of the consistency. And again, unless he's scoring a try or assisting, which doesn't happen too often compared to that of Hamole, that's where some big upside can be. But for the majority of the time, it's just hitting over 60 consistently, and Olakau'atu is going to be a little bit more between the 40s and 50s, and then be able to hit in the 80s and 90s. Which play do you want from ball one? Or are you going to wait until one of them drops a little bit in cash? Heading down the line there, you've got a few guys here. I'm going to compare the 3 while we're here. And that's Dylan Lucas and Beau Fermor, who both have centre wing dual. And then, actually, we'll do those 2, and then we'll go Cam Murray and Preston. So with Lucas and Bowie, those 2 guys have that added benefit of being able to slot into centre wing and having that consistency in base, which some of these other guys in those positions don't have on a regular basis. So those guys, with Lucas, he has a bye round 4. Fermor has one in round 1. Lucas is a little bit more expensive. I expect both of those guys to have a pretty good season, but do you want to have the cash on your bench in round 1, or do you want to build up your team a little bit better, hopefully have a better 17 by round 4, and you can hopefully not have a problem with holding Lucas by that? That's kind of my thoughts and why I would pick him over Beau in that starter. So very, very similar on their base stats, and they both, when they move to center, they actually go pretty well. Cam Murray versus Jacob Preston. We know that Murray's done it for a long time, but the last 2 years haven't been great for him. He has an injury coming into this preseason, through this preseason into round 1, and they do have a lot of middles and edges. So, where does Coach Bennett want to play Koloamatangi? Does he want to have him on the edge? Is he on the edge to start until Ewan Aitken comes back, and then he spends some time in the middle as well? Can Cam Murray get back to those top tier scores? And when you're looking at Preston, we know Presto's got the massive scores in him. He just hasn't been playing the huge minutes for the most part. And if he can do that, he should be a 70 plus guy and has 50 to 100k to make on that starting price for a young gun that is improving. So it's young gun versus the slightly older bull, and who's going to end up prevailing on that one. They're the 2 potential narratives and what he can do with that. Ice Paps, we're still waiting on him and the role that we're going to see from him, but we know if he's a guy on that edge, you're going to want him very, very quickly. You can also look at a comparison between someone like Bateman and Tino. Tino obviously has a lot more upside, and you probably would pick Tino over Bateman just in looking at that in itself. So that's actually helping me in my decisions. And then Hosking, we need to, if you're comparing him and Bateman, Hosking has some better 80-minute scores, but is there more likely for Bateman to play the 80 minutes? They're the questions on that one. Moving down the line, you're getting into that sort of mid-range territory that we're looking at. We had Tom Gilbert in there that you may want to have a thought on, but you can't compare him to too many other guys apart from maybe a Seyfarth and a Kelmer, who I'll pop them 2 against each other. Both guys have some worries in terms of their role and can they keep their position, but we know that they can both score really well into the 60s if they keep their spot with big minutes. So it's just going to be, I think, which one you look at and see a better role come round 1 and who's on the bench and these types of things. If they get that edge spot, to make your decision on that. I just don't think we need to look at it any further apart from who do we think is actually going to get the better role there. Can be compared Burbo versus Piakura. I actually don't know who's going to come out on top on that one. He's got the thumbs down for a reason. He was pretty diabolical last year. And you've got guys like Bird you need to think about as well. You can compare him to Finifuyaki and White as well. You can slot him into that range. There's a bunch of these guys in the mid 300s, and I do think that they help you get some guns in your side. So if you're comparing those guys, probably likely and good to be getting more of them if they are getting a start in their respective sides. We'll leave the second row forwards there on that one and go up to the halfback position. I think it's hard to to compare Cleary and Hughes, because we know that it's Cleary's team now. Munster's getting a bit better health-wise for Hughes, and Cleary loses Luai. So we know that Cleary has more upside, and that's a pretty easy one. Hines in a bit of a class of his own, 80k cheaper than Cleary, and Trindle is coming into the fray a little bit more. We saw last night that Nico unfortunately copped a bit of a groin niggle, so Trindle did end up kicking for the rest of it, so we'll have to see how that plays out as well. But he has a tremendous amount of attack in him, and the Sharks looked good last night overall, being able to put away a slightly understrength Raiders side that we're missing their forwards, which is obviously a big deal there. So that's the halfbacks there, and I think you want to compare the rest of the guys in 5/8. To be fair, it's going to be hard to select any of these other guys in the halfback slot. They just don't have the same upside as those top few guys on that list. So let's go straight to the 5/8 slot to compare a few, and you do have to look at Jaden Campbell, obviously with the round 1 bye. Can you start with that in your team? Look up, I think you can if you're selecting one of these other guys, but let's do some comparisons a little bit further down the line. So let's go for Dylan Brown versus Matt Burton. Dylan averaged better the year before. This was Burton's best year. Dylan also has the dual. What's surprising though is I'm rattling off all these good things for Brown, but I'm still more keen on Burton, as I think that he has a ceiling that is much higher than Dylan Brown overall. They have a lot of weapons in their side now, and it's going to depend where Lomax ends up. If Lomax ends up on that left-hand side with Dylan Brown, I think he's a tremendous choice. If he ends up switching onto the other side and Penasini goes to the left, I do think they'll go right pretty heavily if Moses is there. We also had some times last year where Dylan Brown was pretty dominant without Moses, but there's also times in previous years where he's much better with him. And then Burton, I just think, has more of a ceiling if this team continues to do well. If the team sits about where they were last year, then Burton's probably a 70 guy, because he had a few games with Hutch where they were shocking at the start and he had low scores. Brown could end up at that point as well. So I think they're both very, very similar, and it's probably just personal preference with those guys. Now Munster, he comes into it at 609. You're probably going to compare him to Jerome Luai in this scenario. For those two guys, Munster has tremendous upside based on what he's been at before. But is he fit? Is he ready to go? There's a few question marks for that. With Munster, can he get back to 70 plus in a dominant side? That's the good thing. It's a dominant side. It's by round 2. Can you wait? Or do you go for one of these guys just above? Galvin, these types of players as well, you could have a look at. And then Luai moves from a really incredible team to the worst team in the comp. Can he increase on his 59 average? Yes. By how much? It's going to depend on how good the Tigers are, and are you going to back them to really improve? That's that's going to be the worry there. And then the one down here you could probably have a little look at is going to be like Jack Cole versus Luke Metcalf. And I think in this scenario, Luke Metcalf has much higher upside with the goal kicking and the like. And then you can look at Jack Cogger if he does get the 7. Did only average 41. I think he's not going to be a strike weapon compared to what Metcalf might have to be in his side. Now, moving to centre wing, and there's a couple of guys to look at up top, and I think that we probably have to watch Holmes and Lomax, a bit expensive. If you're looking at Herbie versus Carraz, Herbie, I feel like he almost hit a ceiling, like he absolutely destroyed last year. Big improvement on his setup, but I don't know if the Dolphins have that big improvement losing Wayne. And with Carraz, I think he has that slightly more upside if the Dogs can improve and he can get this back sorted, because he was dealing with it last year and it sounds like he's dealing with it again. But then you have to compare to Ruben Garrick at 680k, and can he be a good selection over those two guys with those 3 head knock games? So he looks like he has plenty of upside on that front as well. And then I think you have to go down to the 500k-ish range. To be honest with you, there's not too many guys you can compare like a Bradman Best with, unless you're looking at Penasini, but I think he wins that one. And guys like Roger, Bradman probably has a little bit more upside on those two, which is where you'd make that selection. But going down into the 500 range, we do have to stop at Greg Marzhew, Campbell Graham, and Isaac Tungo, along with Gerald Skelton. So if you're looking at this, Marzhew has the best and highest upside, considering what he did in 2023. So keep that in mind. Campbell Graham's probably the best player, and we know he has 60s in him as well. Isaac Tungo, we know he has high 60s in him like 2023, but was pretty poor last year, just like Greg. He's in the best team. Campbell Graham's team should improve, but he hasn't played in a long time. And then Skelton's moving to a team that isn't as good. So he's probably last on the list, but has that like untapped potential. And you're looking at guys like Graham that are really consistent. Greg needs some tries to go nuts. And then Isaac Tungo needs a few more tries, but he needs, a bit more ball, which didn't happen at times last year for sure without Nathan Cleary. And then to finish things off, you have to compare Turbo and Latrell. And I just think it's personal preference on these guys. I think they both can go absolutely nuts. Latrell has the goal kicking, which is helpful. Turbo has a terrific starting draw. Latrell has a good first few games, and then it gets harder for him. Yeah, that's the big one. Turbo's draw gets harder as well after the first bunch of games, but a heap at home to start. You can see them at 30% and 27%. Can you just pick both? Yes. Now, I think if you go down, you're looking at a combination between Ponga, Drinky, and Walsh. And Ponga is 30% owned right now, higher than 7% Drinky and 10% Walsh. Scotty is a good chance of getting the goals, but if he doesn't, I don't know if there's any real benefit with him, just because I think the team probably goes a little bit worse. Ponga was up near a 90 price point last year, so he has that upside for sure. And if you don't pick Turbo or Latrell, then I think Callum Ponga is your next best pick. And if you're going 3 fullbacks, then you could definitely go all 3 of them. And we know with Reece Walsh, there's a little bit of untapped potential with him as well, considering the Broncos team was very, very poor. Can Ben Hunt with Reynolds unlock Reece Walsh even further? And can he reduce a couple of more of those errors down? These are all the questions. That's all the comparisons for this video with NRL SuperCoach. And I hope that helps you guys make some of your decisions. I felt like I made it, as I spoke about it, a little bit more clear for me. And guys, if you haven't jumped in the NRL SuperCoach Overall group that I've got that's public, jump in the description for that. If you haven't looked at what's involved in the private group this year, we have prizes for SuperCoach along with NRL Fantasy this year. And I'll help you with your SuperCoach and fantasy team, which is awesome. Jump in the description and check that out. See you guys. Hope that was helpful.